My name is Mark. I am 48 years old and I am a commander in the United States Navy. And on April 14th, 2 years ago, I died. I was clinically dead with no heartbeat and no brain activity for 22 minutes. What I saw during that time, what I was shown, changed not only my life, but my entire understanding of reality. I met the one they call Jesus, and he showed me a vision. It wasn't a vision of fire and brimstone in the way you might think. It was a vision of a silent attack, a spiritual sickness that has taken hold of our nation. And his warning, the truth of what he showed me, it should terrify all of us. Before that day, my life was defined by my uniform. Being a commander wasn't just my job, it was my identity. It was the framework for my entire existence. I lived a life of structure, of orders given and orders followed, of problems analyzed and solutions executed. My world was one of naval bases, deployment schedules, and strategic planning. It was a world I understood, a world I could control. My wife, Sarah, and our son, Josh, they were part of that life, but, if I'm being honest, they orbited the career. They didn't form the center of it. I loved them, of course. I loved them fiercely in the way a man like me knows how. But my passion, my real, driving focus, was my work. My family was getting what was left over. I carried a certain kind of pride. It wasn't arrogance, not exactly. It was the pride of competence. I was good at my job. I had earned my rank. I had led men and women in difficult situations. I believed, deep down, that there was no problem I couldn't solve with enough discipline and intellectual force. This belief was my bedrock. It made me feel secure. It also made me distant. I would come home, my mind still churning with operational logistics or personnel issues. Sarah would try to tell me about her day, about a problem with the car or something funny Josh said. I would nod, I would say the right things, but I wasn't really there. My mind was 1,000 miles away, on a warship in the Pacific or in a briefing room at the Pentagon. I was physically present, but emotionally and spiritually, I was absent. My prayers, when I offered them, were like status reports. They were habitual, rote recitations. I would thank God for blessings received, request protection for my family and my command, and sign off. It was a duty, another box to check on the list of things a good man does. There was no real relationship there. It was a formal correspondence with a distant, respected superior officer. The night before it happened, that flaw was on full display. It was a Thursday evening. I was at the dining room table, my laptop open, reviewing personnel files for an upcoming promotion board. The air was filled with the smell of the spaghetti Sarah had made. Josh, who was 16 at the time, came in, holding a piece of paper. He was excited. "Dad, look, I got an A on my history paper, the one about the Battle of Midway." He had chosen the topic to impress me. I knew that. I glanced up from my screen, my mind still locked on the performance reviews in front of me. "That's great, son. Good work." My eyes were already back on the laptop. He stood there for a moment, the excitement draining from his face. "It's just, I worked really hard on it. I thought maybe you'd want to read it." I felt a flash of irritation, an interruption. "Josh, I'm in the middle of something important here. I'll look at it later." The words were clipped, efficient, dismissive. He just said, "Oh, okay," and walked away. The sound of his quiet footsteps on the stairs was a judgment. Sarah saw the whole thing from the kitchen. She came over, her expression soft with disappointment. "Mark," she said, her voice gentle, "that was important too." I closed the laptop with a sharp snap. "Sarah, these are people's careers. This affects national security. It's a little more pressing than a high school history paper." I saw the hurt in her eyes before she masked it. "Of course," she said, turning back to the sink. "You're right." But we both knew I wasn't. I had traded a moment of connection with my son for a task that could have waited. I had chosen the pride of my work over the heart of my family. I went to bed that night with a sour feeling in my gut, a low-level hum of guilt. I told myself I'd make it right in the morning. I'd read the paper. I'd apologize. I had no idea that in just a few hours, that little moment of failure would come back to haunt me with the force of a tidal wave. I had no idea there would be no morning for me to make it right. The next day started like any other. An early morning run, the air was cool and damp. I remember the feeling of my feet hitting the pavement, the rhythmic sound of my own breathing. It was all so normal, so routine. I got back to the house, showered, and put on my uniform. The crisp, starched khaki, the weight of the medals, the polished insignia. It was my armor, my identity. I was standing in the kitchen, pouring a cup of coffee. Sarah was at the counter, packing a lunch for Josh. I was about to say something, to finally apologize for the night before. But the words never came out. It started as a strange pressure in my chest. Not a sharp pain, but a deep, crushing weight. It felt like an elephant was sitting on me. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to speak, to tell Sarah something was wrong, but all that came out was a choked gasp. The coffee mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the tile floor. The sound was shockingly loud in the quiet kitchen. Sarah spun around, her eyes wide with alarm. Mark, what is it?" My vision started to tunnel. The edges of the room turned gray and fuzzy. Her face, etched with terror, was the last thing I saw clearly. I put a hand out to steady myself on the counter, but my strength was gone. My knees buckled. The last physical sensation I had was the cold, hard shock of the tile floor against my cheek. My final thought, before the world vanished, was not of strategy or command. It was just a name. Josh. I was sorry. And then, everything went black. Everything went quiet. There was no pain, no fear, no confusion. Just a profound, absolute silence. And then, a sensation. It was not a feeling in my body, because I no longer had one. It was a feeling of gentle movement. A slow, effortless pull upwards. I was floating. My consciousness, myself, my me, was rising like a bubble in water. I opened eyes that were not eyes, and I saw. I was near the ceiling of my own kitchen. Below me was a scene of controlled chaos. I saw my body, lying on the floor in my uniform. It looked like a discarded doll, pale and utterly still. Sarah was on the phone, her voice frantic, screaming our address to a 911 operator. Josh was kneeling beside me, beside my body, his face a mess of tears and disbelief, pleading, "Dad, wake up. Please, Dad, wake up." The strange thing was, I felt no panic. The commander in me, the husband, the father, should have been desperate, terrified. But I wasn't. I felt a profound sense of detachment, a perfect, unshakable calm. It was like watching a movie, a very sad movie, but one I was not a part of. I felt a deep, aching pity for them. For my beautiful, strong wife, now so terrified. For my wonderful son, now so broken. My heart, a heart that no longer beat, went out to them. But I felt no sadness for myself. The man on the floor was not me anymore. Paramedics burst through the door. They were all motion and purpose, their voices sharp and professional. Massive cardiac arrest. Starting compressions. Get the paddles ready. I watched as they worked on my body. I saw them cut away my uniform, my armor. I saw the paddles jolt my chest, lifting my lifeless form off the floor. Once, twice. Nothing. No pulse. He's not responding. And through it all, I just floated there, in perfect peace. The commander in me noted their efficiency. The man in me felt sorrow for their struggle. But the soul of me knew it was over. Then, the scene began to change. The edges of my vision, the corners of the kitchen, started to soften and blur. The frantic sounds, the shouting, the weeping, began to fade, as if someone were slowly turning down the volume on the world. The scene below me started to lose its substance. It was becoming like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. The colors bled together, the sharp lines dissolved. Sarah's face, Josh's terror, the paramedics' urgent movements, it all began to wash away into a gentle gray mist. It was like trying to hold on to a dream upon waking. The more I tried to focus, the faster it slipped away. Soon, there was nothing left of my kitchen, my family, my life. There was only the silence. And a darkness. But it was not a cold or empty darkness. It was a comforting darkness, a velvety, peaceful void. It felt like being held. I was not alone in this beautiful, silent night. And then, in the distance, I saw a pinprick of light. It started small, like a single star in an infinite sky. But it began to grow, expanding slowly, steadily, pushing back the gentle darkness. It was not a harsh light. It was warm, golden, and incredibly inviting. It pulled at me, not with force, but with a promise of home. I moved towards it, or perhaps it moved towards me. There was no sense of travel, only of becoming closer. The light grew until it filled my entire awareness. And I found myself standing in a place that defies earthly description. I was in a garden. But the word garden is too small for it. I was standing on grass that was a shade of green, so vibrant, so alive, it made every blade of grass on earth look like a pale imitation. Each blade seemed to hum with its own inner light. There were trees whose leaves glowed with soft colors, silver and gold and hues I had no name for. The air itself was different. Breathing was not necessary, but I felt as if I were inhaling pure life, pure peace. There was a scent in the air, like flowers and rain, and something ancient and holy. The silence here was not an absence of sound, but a presence of peace. It was a silence that was full, resonant, and alive. I stood there, just taking it in, feeling a sense of belonging so profound, it made my 48 years on earth feel like a brief, strange dream. This was real. The world I had left behind was the shadow. And then I saw him. He was walking towards me from beneath one of the glowing trees. My human mind instantly tried to categorize him, to fit him into a box from a Sunday school painting. But he wasn't that. He was not the tall, slender man in a white robe with a sorrowful face. He was strong. He looked like a carpenter, or a mason, or a soldier. His hands were calloused. He was dressed in a simple, seamless tunic of a plain, earthy color. But emanating from him, surrounding him, was the light. The source of all the light in this place was him. It was a light so pure, so holy, it was not just seen, but felt. It was the feeling of unconditional love, of perfect peace, of absolute acceptance, all given form. It radiated from him like heat from a sun. And his eyes. I will never, ever be able to adequately describe his eyes. They were not one color, they were all colors. They held the wisdom of galaxies, the tenderness of a father, the sorrow of a billion heartbreaks, and a love so complete, so personal, it shattered every defense I had ever built. Looking into his eyes was to be known. Completely and utterly known. Every prideful thought I ever had, every selfish act, every moment of failure, every hidden shame, he saw it all. And he loved me anyway. He loved me not in spite of it but through it. I knew, with a certainty that was more absolute than my own name, who this was. This was Jesus. And the man in me, the commander, the one who was always in control, simply broke. My non-physical knees hit the hyper-real grass. A sob of pure, unadulterated relief and joy tore through my soul. I was a lost child who had finally found his father. He came and stood before me. He did not speak with his mouth. The words bloomed inside my mind, clear as a bell, yet gentle as a whisper. They were not heard with ears, but with the very core of my being. "Welcome, Mark, be at peace." The sound of my own name, spoken by him, was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. It was a validation of my entire existence. I could not look up. I felt a wave of my own unworthiness, so profound it was a physical force. How could I, a man of pride and distraction and failure, be in this presence? I am not worthy, I thought. My soul cried it out. He answered, his voice full of a love that was almost painful in its intensity. My love is not a thing to be earned, little one. It is a thing that is given. Stand. I felt a strength flow into me, and I was able to rise to my feet. I finally met his gaze again, and the tears that flowed were not of sorrow or shame, but of a joy so overwhelming it felt like my soul would burst. "You are so, so loved," he said. I could only weep in response. All my words, all my command of language, were gone. He waited patiently, allowing me to release the lifetime of guarded emotions, of stress, of pride. When my soul had quieted, he looked at me with an expression that was both loving and serious. "There is something I need to show you, Mark." The beautiful garden around us did not fade. Instead, the space between us seemed to become a screen, a window into another reality. But first, he looked at me, into me. "Before you can see the world, you must see yourself." And he showed me my life, not as a highlight reel, but as a series of missed connections. It was not a judgment, there was no condemnation in it. It was presented with a heartbreaking gentleness, like a father showing a child where they had stumbled. I saw myself at the dining room table the night before. I saw Josh, his face bright with pride, holding his paper. I saw my own dismissive glance, my hand waving him away. But this time, I felt what Josh felt. I felt the sharp sting of rejection. I felt the hope in his heart curdle into disappointment. I felt his love for me bump up against the wall of my preoccupation and retreat, wounded. Then, the scene changed. I saw Sarah, a few years earlier, trying to talk to me about a fear she had, a worry about her health. I saw myself listening with half an ear, my mind on a coming deployment, offering her a quick, logical, empty reassurance instead of the comfort she needed. I felt her loneliness. It was a cold, heavy blanket in our own home. I felt her feeling unheard, unseen by the one person who was supposed to see her completely. Scene after scene played out. Small moments. A phone call from my parents cut short because I was too busy. A promise to play catch with Josh, forgotten because of a work crisis. 100 small opportunities for love, for connection, all sacrificed on the altar of my career, my pride, my own self-importance. The cumulative weight of it was crushing. It wasn't that I was a bad man, it was that I was an empty man, running on the fuel of professional accomplishment, while my heart and home were starving. My soul ached with a grief so deep, a regret so profound. "I am so sorry," I wept, "so sorry." Jesus' presence was a comfort. His love did not waver. "It is forgiven," he said, "but you must understand. The war you thought you were fighting is not the only war. The greatest battles are fought in these small moments. The enemy does not need to make you evil. He only needs to make you busy." And then, the vision shifted. The personal window closed, and a vast, panoramic one opened. I was looking down on America, not as a map, but as a sea of souls. I saw millions of people, in their homes, in their cars, walking down the street. And I saw what they were looking at. Their faces were bathed in the pale, flickering blue light of screens. Phones, tablets, televisions, laptops. But it was what they were consuming that was the heart of the vision. I saw a teenage girl, her heart breaking not because of a cruel word from a friend, but because a celebrity she had never met posted something controversial. Her entire emotional world was tied to this distant, flawless image. I saw a middle-aged man, just like me, raging in his living room, his face contorted in anger. Not at an injustice in his community, but at a political commentator on a 24-hour news channel, a man paid to keep him angry. I saw a mother, ignoring the beautiful, chaotic symphony of her children playing at her feet, because she was scrolling through the curated, perfect lives of influencers, feeling her own life was lacking in comparison. I saw people of all ages, all races, all backgrounds, giving their most precious resources, their time, their attention, their emotion, their worship to these figures on the screen. Jesus spoke again, his voice filled with a divine sadness that was the most painful thing I have ever experienced. "Do you see, Mark? They are starving. They are dying of thirst while drinking salt water." He swept his hand across the vision. "They worship dying stars of earth, and ignore the creator of the stars." The phrase hit me with the force of a physical blow. Dying stars. They give their hearts to politicians who will fail them, to celebrities who do not know them, to ideologies that will shift like sand. They build their identities on these flickering flames, and so they become flickerings themselves, empty, anxious, easily angered. He explained the enemy's plan, and it was horrifying in its subtlety. This is the silent attack, he said. The enemy is a thief, but he is not stealing their money or their possessions. He is stealing their worship. He is stealing their attention, which is the currency of their hearts. He creates 1,000 little gods for them to bow down to, all of them housed in a glowing box. He doesn't need to build temples of stone. He has built them of silicon and light. And the people flock to them. They cannot hear me in the quiet, because there is no more quiet. They cannot feel my peace, because they are addicted to the chaos of the screen. They cannot love their neighbor, because their neighbor is a political opponent or a rival in a comment section. It is a silent theft of family, of friendship, of purpose. It is an attack that makes a nation's soul hollow from the inside out. I looked at this vision of America, a nation of people I had sworn to protect, and my heart broke. They were being conquered without a single shot being fired. But when, I asked. My voice was a desperate whisper. When is the final attack? The day it all falls apart? I was a military man. I thought in terms of dates, of day, of 0 hour. Jesus looked at me, his eyes full of sorrow and warning. He showed me, not a calendar date, but a condition, a moment. The day of their calamity will not be marked on a calendar. It will not be announced by the sound of sirens or the blast of a bomb. It will be the day when their worship is fully turned. It will be the day they face a true crisis, an economic collapse, a natural disaster, a great pestilence, and they look not to me, but to the dying stars of earth for their salvation. They will cry out to their politicians, their celebrities, their influencers to save them. And they will find only empty platitudes. They will find only darkness and echoes. That is the day of the attack. It is the day their counterfeit gods are revealed as hollow, and their hearts, having no other foundation, will collapse in on themselves in despair. That is the day the thief wins. The weight of this revelation was unbearable, to see a nation so lost, so deceived by such cheap tricks. I died for a relationship, not a simulation, he said, his voice a plea. I long to speak with them, to walk with them, to give them a peace that is real. But they have filled their lives with ghosts and echoes, and they have forgotten the sound of my voice. His instruction was simple, a command that echoed in the core of my soul. You must tell them to choose what is real. Tell them to turn off the noise and find me in the silence. Tell them their smallest prayer, offered from a true heart, shakes the foundations of this darkness. Tell them to look up from the dying stars and see the one who holds the stars in his hand. The vision faded. I was back in the garden, standing before him. The peace of this place was overwhelming. The love radiating from him was my true home. And I was filled with a new kind of dread, the thought of leaving. Please, I begged. I was the commander, a man of pride, now pleading like a child. Don't make me go back. Please let me stay here with you. The world I had just seen was so broken, so loud, so painful. This place was perfection. It was reality. I can't go back there, I whispered. It's too hard. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a smile touch his lips. It was a smile of infinite tenderness and understanding. Your work is not done, Mark. But I'm not strong enough. You will not be alone, he promised. I will never leave you. I will be with you. You must go back to be a light for Sarah and for Josh. You must go back to tell them what you saw. You must help them choose what is real. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It was not a physical touch, but a transference of strength, of purpose, of love. Go now, little one, be my witness. And with that, he released me. It felt like a fall. A violent, wrenching, horrifying plunge back into the cold and the dark. I was ripped away from the light, from the peace, from home. The return to my body was the single most painful experience of my existence. It was a violent slam into a cage of flesh. My first sensation was a searing fire in my lungs as I took a breath. It burned. Then came the pain, 1,000 points of it. The dull ache in my chest from the compressions, the sting of the IV in my arm, the bruising where I had fallen. The sensory overload was immediate and brutal. The lights above me were blindingly, painfully bright. The sounds were a cacophony, the beeping of machines, the urgent voices, the sound of my own ragged gasp for air. And overriding it all was a grief so profound, a homesickness so acute, it was a physical agony. I had been torn from heaven, from the presence of love itself, and thrown back into this broken, noisy world. I opened my eyes, and a paramedic who had been leaning over me yelled, "We've got a pulse, he's breathing, he's back." My eyes found Sarah. She was huddled in a corner, but when she saw my eyes open, she let out a cry and rushed forward. Her face was the face of a miracle received. But all I could feel was the soul-crushing loss of the place I had just left. Tears streamed down my face, but they were not tears of joy, they were tears of grief. Later, in the hospital, the doctor came into my room, holding a chart, his face a mask of complete and utter bafflement. "Commander," he began, sitting down, "I'm not sure how to explain this." He showed me the reports from the paramedics. "You were in full cardiac arrest for a total of 22 minutes. No heartbeat, no respiration. By all accounts, we shouldn't be having this conversation." He shook his head, looking at the papers and then back at me. "There should be massive, catastrophic brain damage, heart damage. You should be, at best, severely disabled. But your scans, they're normal. Your heart shows some bruising, but it's fundamentally sound. Your brain activity is perfectly normal." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I've been a cardiologist for 30 years. I've never seen anything like this. Medically, this is impossible." He looked me in the eye. "I'm not a particularly religious man, Commander, but I don't know what else to call this. It's a miracle." I just nodded. I knew it was. But the miracle wasn't that I had survived. The miracle was what I had seen. The change in me was immediate and radical. The old Mark, the prideful commander, died on that kitchen floor. The man who came back was someone new. The first thing I did when I got home was find Josh's history paper. It was still on his desk. I sat down and read every single word, twice. Then I went and found him. He was wary, expecting the same distracted father. I looked him in the eye. "Josh," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "your paper was brilliant. I am so proud of you. And I am so deeply sorry I didn't see it, that I didn't see you before." The wall between us, a wall I had spent years building, crumbled in that single moment. With Sarah, the change was just as profound. That heavy, lonely blanket that had suffocated our home was gone. I started to listen, truly listen. I put my phone away when she spoke. I looked into her eyes. I learned to be present. My career was no longer my God. I still did my job and did it well, but it was now what I did, not who I was. Who I was a husband, a father, a man who had been given a second chance and a sacred mission. The center of my life shifted from the bridge of a ship to my own living room. My prayers were no longer status reports, they were conversations. They were filled with gratitude, with humility, and with the constant, awestruck memory of his love. So I'm telling you now what he told me to tell you. He is real. His love is real. Heaven is real. And the warning he gave me is also real. Look at your life. Look at your heart. The attack he showed me is happening right now. It's a silent, creeping invasion for your soul. The tools themselves, the phones, the televisions, they are not inherently evil. They are pieces of plastic and metal. But the way we are using them, the way they are being used against us, is creating a spiritual sickness. We are being trained to worship the temporary, the hollow, the dying stars of this world. We are being made empty. So I am asking you, I am begging you, to heed this warning. When this is over, I want you to do something. Put your phone down. Turn off the television. Look at the people you share your life with. Look them in the eye and truly see them. Go into a quiet room and just sit there. Endure the uncomfortable silence until it is no longer uncomfortable, until you can feel that it is not empty, but full. And ask yourself this question, honestly. Who or what are you worshiping? Where do you put your attention, your emotion, your hope? Because your true master is whatever you look to for your salvation. Choose what is real. Choose connection over distraction. Choose love over anger. Choose the Creator over His creation. He is waiting for you in the quiet. He is waiting to tell you that you are so loved. Please, do not be too busy to hear Him.